Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Jarrod D. King here, and I did not put up a new video last week because I was on a little vacation with some friends in Vermont, and it was a really great trip, and I'm so happy that I went. I definitely got the chance to recharge. But today, I am coming at you with a new video that hopefully it will be interesting to you. If you read my book, this will definitely be interesting. So basically, every week I'll be going in order through the chapters of my book, Pangaea, Unsettled Land. And I'll just be giving you some commentary on it. I'm going to be talking about my chapter summary. I'm going to give you goals for the chapter, like what I set out to do with the chapter, why you will love the chapter, and why you may even put it down after reading. So before we get started, I have to give you a spoiler alert because again, I am going to be giving you a chapter of the summary and of each summary moving ahead. So if you haven't read the book already, I recommend you head over to Amazon or Barnes& and Noble or Apple iBooks or Google Play, wherever, and get a copy of the book today and follow along with me. So the chapter summary. Chapter 1 is where we're starting, and this chapter is broken up into two parts. This is where we get introduced to an 8-year-old Gisela, and she is sitting by the frozen lake in the northern third, and she's crying about something. And this first part of the first half of the chapter, we open up to this scene of her crying, and her neighbors kind of consoling her, kind of just found her there, and the one neighbor comes from the lake and says, nobody could have slipped in there. So, I don't. So basically, he didn't understand what her crying was about, and then they take her home. But then in the second part of the chapter, we jump back in time to a few moments ago, and we see why she's crying. So basically, in the second half of the chapter, she and her mother approach the frozen lake. It's snowing outside, it's frozen, and we get introduced to a bunch of different elements of the story. I'll go into that more a little bit later. But basically, Gisela gets on the ice. They're there to ice skate. So Gisela gets on the ice, and she starts to hear this whisper, like, Gisela, Gisela, So she's looking, she's like, wait, is that my mom calling me or what? Because her mom's still on the bench tying her ice skates or something. So she hears the voice and she tries to listen to it, and then she falls through the ice. And then her mother comes and frantically tries to save her, and she does. She picks Gisela up out of the water. It's a really dramatic scene, and she says, "Okay, Gisela, go back to the bench. Basically, we're over for the day." So Gisela turns around, and then she hears a splash, and then as soon as she turns back around to find where her mother is, the hole in the lake has disappeared. It's completely covered over, and she hears, "I'll be waiting for you, Gisela," like that whisper in the background. So now I'm going to move into my goals for the chapter and some of the changes that had happened over drafting. So basically, my goal with this chapter was to basically start the book off with a bang. I wanted to hook the reader, I wanted to hook you in, and I wanted you to see that I could deliver on the promise of this underlying tension and all of, giving you a payoff for all of the suspense that I kind of built up to. I originally did not have the neighbor sequence in the beginning of the book. That was not how the book opened. That was not how I had envisioned it opening. I started with setting the scene, talking about the snowy scenery and the sun that hid behind the clouds, hoping that it didn't it was a really flowery line in there that I just love. You can check my blog post about that to get the gist. And if you read it already, then of course you may already recognize what I'm trying to get to. But yeah, I opened up with that, and my editor told me that was really impersonal. I had a habit of doing that throughout the book, and so I kind of had to change a lot of the ways that I brought that I brought the reader into the next chapter. I always had it in my mind to set up the scenery and the setting before getting into what the characters were doing in the room. And that's not necessarily the best way. It's not the wrong way to do it, but doing it too much, it kind of can take the reader out. So I started with an emotion. I started with the character. I started with Gisela crying, tears behind her eyes, blurring her vision. That's kind of what I started with to kind of get the reader, try to get you engrossed in the character and wondering what was wrong with her, you know. And I think that that suggestion really did help me because it built up a little bit more of the tension, as opposed to just, you know, hey, this is a really cute looking scene, and then getting into the tension. I think it kind of started off with some foreboding elements there. So why would you love this scene? I believe that it's exciting and it draws you into the world. I did put out some little breadcrumbs there about, you know, the Luce. I talked about the great nations. I talked about Etherians, and I even talked about Elau, the god Elau in that world. But I didn't really go into explaining them too much. You got to see one of the Luce, the Cephal, the horse, there in that scene. And that was my way of kind of introducing magic right up front, without it being too jarring later on. I wanted you to know that magic existed. So yeah, that was my reasoning for that. But I didn't want to go into world building too much. I just wanted to kind of ease you in and let you know that, yeah, there's some stuff going on here. And the other thing would be that I gained some of your trust, that you started to trust the narrator, that you started to trust the author, to lead you on this journey. You know, if I had done a horrible job of, you know, sticking the landing as far as setting up all of this tension and then not giving you anything right up front, then it would have been a lot harder to keep you engaged through the end. But I think that I showed that I could do that. And I think that that gave you a little bit more of a way to be invested in the remainder of the story, or at least to continue on to the next couple of chapters to see what would happen. So why would you dislike the chapter? Well, I think the mix of technologies may have been a little bit too much. Or I don't think that, but I mean, I think that it may be too much for some people. You know, I had Gisela and her mom riding in on horseback because they didn't want to stir up the Luce. But at the same time, I'm talking about, you know, there's some mention of wheelers, which is basically cars. And, you know, her mom is looking through binoculars with some kind of electronic, you know, device on it or something, like some kind of a button that she presses that kind of changes the look of it. So, you know, it's definitely a mix, and hopefully I didn't confuse it with what the genre of this would be. And, you know, I've really had actually a hard time explaining to people what kind of fantasy this is, because there's so many different types. There's like, you know, the epic, the urban fantasy, there's like paranormal. I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole there, but I always thought of this as more of the epic fantasy. But when I say that, it's like people will think that it's like Lord of the Rings or something like that. And then I'm like, well, no, it's not quite like Lord of the Rings. And then they'll be like, oh, so it's more like Harry Potter, where it's kind of like more modern-ish. Like, you know, you have those parts of Harry Potter where it's set in like a modern kind of world, and then they kind of switch over to the Hogwarts thing. And at least that's what I saw in the movies. I did not read the book. But I mean, I guess that would be a better explanation of it if I had explained it that way. But even when people said Harry Potter, I was like, oh, it's not quite like Harry Potter either. But you know, when you read the book, you kind of get the gist of it. And I didn't want to say it was urban fantasy because I believe that that's a different set of rules than a story like what I'm doing in Pangaea. The other thing before I end was that, you know, some of the cracks in my writing may show. I know that I was a new writer, not a new writer, but I was a new novelist when I wrote this book. I had always written shorter pieces, mostly for like, creative writing classes and stuff in high school and in college, and for myself sometimes. But this is not that. This is definitely a much longer piece that had to be plotted out and planned, and on some level kind of, what we say pantsed, basically just writing by the seat of your pants. I kind of had to do that a little bit with this book too. And so, some of the deficiencies in writing may have shown through to some of the more seasoned readers and editors. I tried to cover that up, but I'm sure there are plenty of areas where it's not quite up to snuff. But I'm hoping to change that with my books moving forward, because I definitely take a lot of the criticism to heart in a good way. So what's next? In the next video, next week, I will be talking about chapter 2. And this is where I introduce the main character, Slade Maxwell. Slade had a lot of similarities to me when I conceptualized the character. And when I started writing the book, there was just a lot of similarities. And I'm going to discuss that. And I'll make it a little deep. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be interesting. You're going to get a little bit more insight into how Slade paralleled my life. But that's not to say that Slade is me. He's just, I guess, inspired by true events. But yeah, that's it for right now. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And please be sure to subscribe to continue to watch and listen into the commentary for Pangaea, Unsettled Land. And I will see you next time.